I'm David Tran, 45 years old, a software engineer living in Seattle, Washington. My life revolves around two things: caring for Ethan, my 7-year-old son, and my job at Apex Innovations, an up-and-coming tech company in downtown. I'm not the type to show off. I drive an old Toyota, live in a high-end but modest condo, and keep my successes under wraps. Few know that, beyond writing code, I own a significant real estate portfolio through my company, Summit Ventures, including the building where I live. But that day, when everything seemed stable, my life turned upside down because of an accident and an ultimatum from someone I never expected. My boss, Richard Hayes. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video. That morning started like any other. I brewed coffee, made breakfast with toast and peanut butter for Ethan. The boy with messy brown hair and bright eyes chattered about his plan to build a spaceship from Lego. "Dad, I'll be an astronaut, but also an engineer like you, to fix ships in space," Ethan said, waving a butter-smeared spoon. I smiled, urging him to eat quickly to catch the school bus. After seeing him off, I returned to the condo, fired up my computer and started my remote workday. As a software engineer, I usually work from home, only going to Apex Innovations' office for important meetings. My job is solid, but the pressure is real, especially under Richard Hayes, the company's CEO. Richard, 50, is the kind of guy who craves all eyes on him. With expensive suits, a flashy Rolex, and a booming voice, he runs Apex Innovations like a king. I've never meshed with Richard. He often assigns me impossible projects, then publicly criticizes me if I don't finish on time. But I still do well, stay professional, and quietly build my career. What Richard doesn't know, and I deliberately hide, is that I own the condo building where we both live. I rent a unit on the 8th floor, while Richard occupies a fancier penthouse. He always thought he was the landlord, collecting rent through a management company, and I let him believe that to avoid trouble. Everything changed that noon. My phone rang, the school's number flashing on the screen. My heart sank. Schools don't call midday unless it's serious. "Mr. Tran," the principal's voice trembled. "Ethan had an accident at the school park. He fell off his bike, hit his head hard. Paramedics are taking him to Seattle Children's Hospital." I barely heard anything else. I grabbed my keys, wallet, and rushed out. Computer still on, coffee spilled across the table. Driving, I could only pray. At the hospital, the scene was a nightmare. Ethan lay motionless in the ER, face pale, wires and tubes everywhere. Dr. Elizabeth Kim, a pediatric neurologist, explained that Ethan had a severe traumatic brain injury. "We've placed him in a medically induced coma to reduce brain pressure," she said, her gaze serious but gentle. "He needs surgery now to reduce swelling. The next 72 hours are critical." I nodded, my mind reeling. I held Ethan's tiny cold hand, whispering, "Dad's here, son. You'll be okay." The days that followed, I practically lived in the ICU. I slept in a chair, only leaving to shower briefly or grab supplies from Lisa Carter, my close friend, a kindergarten teacher. Lisa brought clean clothes, coffee, and words of encouragement. Mr. Henry Parker, my elderly neighbor, called hourly for updates, his voice shaky when mentioning Ethan. Medical bills piled up, insurance covered only part, and my savings dwindled. I tried to focus on Ethan, but my mind raced about what he'd face if he woke up. Then Richard showed up. It was the 5th day since the accident, as I sat by Ethan, reading a dinosaur book he loved. The ICU door opened, and Richard walked in, suit pristine, not a wrinkle. I was shocked. He never cared about employees' personal lives, let alone visited a hospital. "David," Richard said, his voice smooth as in meetings, "we need to talk about the condo." I frowned, exhausted and unprepared for any workplace drama. "Now's not the time, Richard. Ethan's still critical." He ignored me, sitting down, placing his expensive leather briefcase on the floor. "I know the timing isn't ideal, but this is business. Your rent's tripling to $7,000, starting next month. If you can't pay, you need to move out by tomorrow morning." I thought I misheard. Current rent was $2,500, already above market. With medical bills mounting, this demand wasn't just unreasonable, it was cruel. "You know I can't pay that," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And tenant laws don't allow sudden increases like this." Richard shrugged, a cold smile. "Laws don't matter. The building's mine and I need the money. Pay or leave, your choice." I looked at him, a man who'd forced me to work nights to save his projects, now exploiting my weakest moment. But I didn't argue. I reached for my briefcase by the chair, where I always kept a black envelope, not because I anticipated this day, but because I'm always prepared. "All right," I said, voice even. "I have your answer." I handed the envelope to Richard. He opened it, pulling out a stack of documents with legal seals. His face shifted from smug to confused, then pale. "What's this?" he asked, voice starting to shake. "Ownership deeds," I replied, still calm. Summit Ventures, my company, owns that building, and the entire portfolio you thought was yours. Richard flipped through the papers, hands trembling. I looked at him, not with triumph, but with quiet resolve. After handing the black envelope to Richard, I sat back by Ethan's bedside, holding my son's hand, listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor. A flood of memories rushed in, like puzzle pieces explaining why I always kept Summit Ventures a secret, and why I let Richard believe he was the landlord for 3 years. To understand this moment, I need to look back at my journey from a self-reliant kid in Portland, Oregon, to the man facing crises in both family and work. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland, where my parents, Min and Lan Tran, ran a small faux shop. They were hard-working, but their attention always gravitated toward my sister Len, more than me. Len, 3 years older, was the family's pride, top of her class, played violin, and invited to every Vietnamese community event. I didn't resent Len, but feeling overshadowed shaped who I am. At 14, I started delivering newspapers to buy programming books, a passion sparked by borrowing a basic book from the library. By 16, I saved enough for an old bike which Lynn refused to ride, calling it too tacky. My parents saw my independence as aloofness, but for me, it was the only way to survive. After high school, I earned a scholarship to the University of Washington in Seattle, majoring in software engineering. College wasn't easy. I worked 2 part-time jobs waiting tables and lab assistant to cover expenses. Meanwhile, Lynn was supported by our parents at an expensive private college in California, studying marketing. After graduating, I moved to Seattle, working at tech startups, building a reputation for solving complex problems. Lynn returned to Portland, working for an ad agency, but constantly in trouble due to lavish spending and failed relationships. My personal life wasn't smooth either. I met Emily, an interior designer, at a tech conference in Seattle. She was charming, ambitious, and we married after a year of dating. Ethan was born soon after, bringing light to my life. But Emily wasn't content with my frugal lifestyle. She craved lavish vacations, designer goods, while I focused on saving for Ethan's future. When Ethan was 3, I discovered Emily had drained our joint account for personal spending. The divorce was bitter. Emily fought for custody, not out of love, but to secure higher child support. The court awarded me custody, and Emily vanished south, never contacting us again. At 40, my father died suddenly from a heart attack, leaving an unexpected inheritance. In his will, he wrote, "David, you've always been independent. This money is to ensure your security later." It wasn't a fortune, but enough to start Summit Ventures, a real estate investment company. I researched the market, and a golden opportunity arose when Richard's property management company, handling many Seattle assets, decided to sell their portfolio. Richard, with his extravagant lifestyle and failed investments, couldn't afford it. Through Summit Ventures, I bought the entire portfolio, including the condo building where Richard and I live. I kept it secret, using my lawyer William Chen as the front, and let the management company collect rent, making Richard think he was still the landlord. At Apex Innovations, Richard was always a thorn in my side. He ran the company like a stage for his ego, often assigning me impossible projects, then criticizing me if they weren't perfect. Once, he demanded I complete a security system in 2 weeks, a job needing 2 months, just to impress investors. I worked nights, finished on time, but Richard took all the credit. I didn't fight back, not out of weakness, but because I knew my real strength lay in preparation and patience. Keeping my ownership secret wasn't just to avoid trouble with Richard. I knew his character, arrogant, controlling, always looking to exploit others. If he knew I was the landlord, he'd demand favors, delay rent, or turn the lease into a manipulation tool. So I let the management company act as a middleman, funneling rent from Richard and myself to Summit Ventures, then back to my account after fees. I essentially paid rent to myself, an odd arrangement but one that kept things stable. But now, with Ethan in the ICU, that stability shattered. I wasn't surprised by Richard's ruthlessness, but I didn't expect him to go this far. I sat by Ethan's bed, the dim hospital light casting shadows on his pale face. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the room's only sound, a reminder that Ethan was still fighting. But Richard wouldn't let me be. Hours after leaving the ICU with the documents, he returned, his usual arrogance replaced by a mix of confusion and anger. Richard walked in without knocking, suit still crisp but eyes sharp. He held up the documents, voice trembling with restraint. "What's this game, David?" he asked, nearly shouting, making me glance at Ethan, worried the noise would disturb him. "You think you can fool me with these papers? Summit Ventures? You don't have the means to own a whole building." I took a deep breath, staying calm. Every cell in me wanted to yell, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. "Richard," I said evenly, "I'm not fooling you. Those documents are real. Summit Ventures is my company, and I own the building where we live." He laughed, a harsh, joyless sound. "You, a mid-level software engineer, owning a real estate portfolio? Don't kid yourself. I checked with the management company. They said the owner's an LLC, not you. I nodded, unsurprised. That's right. Summit Ventures is an LLC, and I'm behind it. You can call my lawyer, William Chen. His number's on the first page. He'll confirm everything. Richard flipped through the papers, as if hoping to find a mistake. His face flushed red, and I realized he wasn't just shocked but humiliated. The man who always saw himself as the boss, now discovered his employee held the real power. So why did you let me think I was the landlord for 3 years? Richard asked, his voice lower but still sharp. I looked him straight in the eye. Because I know you, Richard. If you knew I was the landlord, you'd demand favors, delay rent payments, or turn everything into a personal battle. I wanted to keep things professional. He winced, as if I'd slapped him. Professional? You call this deception professional? What game are you playing, David? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I turned to look at Ethan, his small hand limp in mine. Game? I said, my voice dropping. You came here, into my son's hospital room, while he's fighting to survive, and demanded I pay $7,000 in rent. What do you call that, Richard? Business? He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand to stop him. I don't want to hear more excuses. You need money, I get it. But exploiting me at my lowest? That's a line I can't let you cross. Richard stood frozen, clutching the documents so tightly the papers crumpled. I could see him scrambling to regain control, but he couldn't. You can't do this, he finally said, his voice almost pleading. The building is my income source. I need that money. I shook my head. The building isn't yours, Richard, and the current $2,500 rent is already above market. $7,000 is absurd, and you know it. He took a step forward, as if to intimidate, but stopped when he saw my gaze. Just then, the ICU door opened. Lisa Carter, my best friend, walked in with a coffee and a bag of snacks. She glanced at Richard, then at me, instantly sensing the tension. Everything okay, David? She asked, her eyes wary. I nodded but kept my focus on Richard. We're discussing the rent. Richard wants to raise it to $7,000. Lisa raised an eyebrow, clearly stunned. $7,000? While Ethan's like this? Are you serious? Richard stepped back, visibly uncomfortable being confronted by both of us. This is private, he muttered, but Lisa didn't let him off easily. Private? You brought business into a kid's hospital room. That's the lowest thing I've ever seen. Richard didn't respond. He turned, still gripping the documents, and left the room without another word. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving a heavy silence. Lisa placed a hand on my shoulder. You okay? She asked. I sighed, exhaustion washing over me. I don't know, Lisa. I just want to focus on Ethan. But Richard keeps stirring things up. She nodded, handing me the coffee. You did the right thing standing up to him. But this isn't over, is it? I nodded. Not yet, but I'm ready. Are you sure you want to take him on like this, David? She asked, her voice low to avoid disturbing Ethan. I sighed, rubbing my hands over my face. I don't want to, Lisa. But he left me no choice. Demanding $7,000 rent, while Ethan's like this. I can't let him keep manipulating me. Lisa nodded, but I could see her concern. He's your boss. With his personality, how do you think he'll retaliate? I shrugged. I don't know, but I've kept Summit Ventures secret this long to protect myself. Now that he knows the truth, I'm not backing down. Lisa left to give me space with Ethan, but before going she left a sandwich and told me to eat something. I was grateful, but food was the last thing on my mind. That afternoon, I called William Chen, my lawyer, to prepare for whatever Richard might do. Has he contacted the management company yet? I asked. William, calm as ever, confirmed. Richard called this morning demanding ownership verification. I sent copies of the contracts and legal documents. He can't dispute it. Want me to draft a new lease for him? I agreed. Make it standard. Market rate at $2,500. No special favors. I want everything clear. William promised a draft within 24 hours. And I felt relieved knowing I was in control. That evening, Dr. Elizabeth Kim entered with a grave expression. David, we just reviewed Ethan's brain scans. There's a sudden increase in intracranial pressure. We need surgery now to relieve it, or it could be life-threatening. My heart stopped. But you said he was stable, I whispered, voice trembling. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her gaze steady. With brain injuries, conditions can change rapidly. Ethan's young and healthy, which is in his favor, but we need to act now. I signed the consent forms, my mind foggy, barely managing to call Lisa with the news. She promised to come right away. As the nurses prepared to wheel Ethan to surgery, I held his hand, whispering, You're strong, Ethan. Dad's waiting for you. Watching him being taken away, covered in wires and tubes, I felt more helpless than ever. I leaned against the wall, fighting back tears. Lisa arrived soon after, bringing a jacket and a water bottle. You don't have to be strong alone, she said, hugging me gently. While waiting for surgery, I got an email from Richard. Subject, we need to talk. The message was brief but tense. David, this can't end like this. I need to meet you to resolve the building issue. Call me. I deleted it without replying. He could wait. The surgery lasted 4 hours. Lisa sat with me in the waiting room, quietly reading a book but ready when I needed to talk. When Dr. Elizabeth Kim left the ICU after Ethan's second surgery, I sat by my son's bed, feeling like I'd just weathered a storm. Ethan's hand was still small and cold in mine, but the steady heart monitor gave some comfort. The surgery succeeded in reducing brain pressure, but Dr. Kim warned the next 48 hours were critical. The next morning, I woke up in the hospital chair, neck stiff from sleeping awkwardly. Lisa Carter had draped a thin blanket over me before leaving late the previous night. She texted, "Rest a bit, David. I'll bring breakfast later." I smiled, grateful for Lisa's thoughtfulness. She wasn't just a friend but a lifeline in these dark days. While waiting for Ethan's checkup, James Lee, a colleague at Apex Innovations, called. "David, people at the company are buzzing about Richard," he said cautiously. "Yesterday he lost it in a meeting, slammed the table, and stormed out. Rumor is he's in deep debt from a failed startup. Know anything?" I briefly explained Richard's rent demand and my revelation about owning the building. James whistled in shock. "Man, you kept that quiet. But be careful, Richard's not the type to lose easily." I thanked James, noting the debt info. If Richard was desperate, it explained his cruelty. At noon, my elderly neighbor Henry Parker visited. He brought homemade chicken soup, its aroma reminding me I hadn't eaten since morning. "How's Ethan doing, David?" he asked, his kind eyes glancing at the bed. I updated him, touched by his care. Henry had taught Ethan to fix bikes and shared stories from his railroad engineer days, and the boy adored him. "That kid's tough," Henry said, patting my shoulder. "So are you. Don't let other stuff distract you." That afternoon, a miracle happened. Nurse Sarah Nguyen, Ethan's caregiver, was checking his reflexes when I saw his fingers twitch. I jumped up, heart pounding. "Sarah, he moved," I said, voice shaking. Sarah rechecked, shining a flashlight in Ethan's eyes and smiling. "Good pupil response. This is a positive sign, David. I'll get Dr. Kim." When Dr. Kim arrived, she confirmed Ethan was showing signs of waking, though it would be slow. "He might open his eyes or move more in the next few days," she said. I held Ethan's hand, whispering, "You're doing great, son. Dad's here." That hope gave me strength to face Richard. That evening he texted, "David, we need to meet. I checked with my lawyer. You're telling the truth, but this can't end like this." I didn't reply immediately, calling William to discuss. "Richard might owe money to loan sharks," I said, based on James's info. "I don't want to corner him, but I can't let him threaten me either." William suggested offering Richard a new lease, and if he needed cash to clear debts, a loan with clear terms. "But protect yourself," William warned. "Don't let emotions get in the way." I thought all night, weighing keeping boundaries versus helping Richard. He was selfish, but I didn't want to be vengeful. I decided to offer a loan for his debts, with reasonable interest, and a condition he attend financial counseling. If he refused, I'd ask him to leave the building. The next morning, I texted Richard, "Meet me at the hospital at 3 p.m. We'll sort this out." He replied instantly, "Fine, I'll be there." While waiting for Richard, Lisa called. She said she'd met James at a cafe, and he heard Richard was trying to convince Apex Innovations board to cut some employees' salaries, including mine, to offset his financial losses. "He really doesn't know when to stop," Lisa said, angry. My anger flared, but I stayed calm. When Richard Hayes walked into the ICU, his usual arrogance was gone, replaced by clear unease, as if he knew he'd lost the upper hand. "Richard," I began, calm but firm, "we need to settle this. I don't want to fight, but I won't let you threaten me or my family anymore." He nodded, sitting across from me, hands clasped tightly as if holding back. I pulled a lease agreement from my briefcase, placing it before him. "This is the new lease, $2,500 a month, market rate. You can stay in the building but must follow the terms like any tenant. No favors, no exceptions." Richard skimmed the document, lips pressed tight. "You're serious, David? After all I've done for you at Apex Innovations?" I raised an eyebrow. "What you've done? You mean assigning impossible projects, taking my credit, or demanding $7,000 rent while my son's in the ICU?" Richard flinched but didn't argue. I continued, voice steady. "I know you're in debt from a failed startup. I don't want to push you to the edge, so I have another offer." He looked up, eyes mixing doubt and curiosity. "I'll loan you money to clear your debts with reasonable interest, but you must sign a loan contract and attend financial counseling. If you refuse, this lease is your only option. Your call." Richard stayed silent, his gaze shifting between the documents and me. Finally he sighed. "I don't have a choice, do I? I'll review the lease and the loan." I nodded. "Good, but this is your last chance, Richard. I'm not playing manipulation games." He stood, took the documents and left without another word. That afternoon, a miracle happened. Nurse Sarah Nguyen was checking Ethan when he opened his eyes, if only for a few seconds. His brown eyes were hazy but clearly awake. "Ethan," I exclaimed, gripping his hand. Sarah checked his reflexes, smiling. "He's responding. I'll call Dr. Kim." When Dr. Elizabeth Kim arrived, she confirmed Ethan was gradually waking up. "He recognizes your voice, David," she said. "Keep talking to him." I sat by Ethan, telling him about the Lego spaceships he loved, my voice choked with emotion. "You make Dad so proud, son." In the days that followed, Ethan made clear progress. He started speaking short sentences, his voice weak but distinct. "Dad, I want Lego," he whispered, making me laugh. I brought a small Lego set to the hospital, and though Ethan could only point to guide my building, his eyes lit up like before the accident. Lisa Carter, my best friend, brought a book about astronauts, and Mr. Henry Parker, my elderly neighbor, sent a hand-drawn picture of Ethan on the moon. "The boy's a warrior," Henry wrote in a note. Their support made me realize I wasn't alone. As Ethan recovered, Richard began to change. A week after our meeting, he emailed to confirm signing the lease and agreeing to the loan plan. "I've enrolled in a financial counseling course," he wrote, his tone different, not arrogant but almost sincere. I called William to finalize the loan paperwork, asking him to ensure everything was clear. "You're giving him a second chance," William remarked. "Hope he doesn't waste it." I wasn't sure Richard would fully change, but I wanted to believe he could learn from his mistakes. At Apex Innovations, I started rethinking my future. James Lee revealed that Richard was improving his management, yelling at staff less, but I no longer wanted to work under him. I'd been quietly developing a tech startup focused on data security, and Summit Ventures was strong enough to fund it. The thought of leaving Apex made me both anxious and excited. I shared this with Lisa over coffee at the hospital. "You deserve to take charge of your life," she said. "Ethan needs a confident dad, not someone manipulated." One evening, Ethan unexpectedly drew a picture with colored pencils Sarah had brought. It showed me standing by him in the hospital, with shaky writing, "Dad is the strongest." I hugged Ethan, tears falling silently. "You're the strongest," I whispered. That moment solidified my resolve. I'd build a better future for Ethan, not just with Summit Ventures, but with my own startup. When Richard visited again, bringing a small spaceship model for Ethan, I was surprised. "I want to apologize," he said, avoiding my gaze, "for the rent thing, and how I treated you." I nodded, not forgiving outright, but acknowledging his effort. "Do right by the contract, and Ethan, Richard, that's the only way forward." He nodded, leaving with a hint of relief. I looked at Ethan, smiling with his spaceship model, and knew we were on the right path. The day Ethan was discharged was a milestone I'll never forget. After long weeks in Seattle, Children's Hospital ICU, my son walked through our downtown Seattle condo door with a beaming smile, though still wearing a medical helmet to protect his healing head from the brain injury. Our condo buzzed with joy that day. Lisa Carter, my best friend, and Mr. Henry Parker, my elderly neighbor, had hung a Welcome Home Ethan banner across the living room. Ethan cheered, seeing his Lego collection intact on the shelf, as if he'd never left. "Dad, can I build a spaceship?" he asked, eyes sparkling. I laughed, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Rest a bit first, son. Dr. Kim said you need to take it easy." Ethan nodded, but I knew he was eager to dive back into his world. Lisa brought a tray of chocolate cupcakes, Ethan's favorite, while Henry gave him a homemade lasagna, so fragrant it reminded me I'd skipped breakfast. "No need to worry about cooking tonight," Henry said, his gaze kind. James Lee, a colleague from Apex Innovations, stopped by with a gift card for a meal delivery service. "So you can focus on Ethan," he said. I was touched by everyone's support. During the hospital days, as I juggled worry for Ethan and dealing with Richard, they stood by me, like a second family. That evening, we held a small party. Ethan, though tiring faster than before, eagerly shared his dreams of becoming an astronaut or engineer. "I want to build spaceships for NASA," he declared, holding a cupcake. Lisa laughed loudly. "You'll be the best astronaut, Ethan." Henry recounted a story about fixing a stuck train, leaving Ethan wide-eyed in awe. Watching my son bask in the joy, I felt a weight lift, but I also knew the road ahead was long. Ethan needed physical and cognitive therapy, and a surgery to replace part of his skull would happen in a few months. But he was here, alive and strong, and that mattered most. Richard didn't show up, but he texted earlier, "Congrats on Ethan's homecoming. I'll visit later, don't want to intrude on the first day." This unexpected thoughtfulness surprised me. I contacted William Chen to discuss leaving Apex. "You've got Summit Ventures backing you," he said. "Your startup has potential, but it'll take time. Make sure you have enough reserves for Ethan." I agreed and began drafting a detailed business plan, working late after Ethan slept. Seeing my son asleep with the spaceship model Richard gave on his table, I felt a fierce drive. A week later, Richard visited. He brought a book about the universe for Ethan, delighting the boy. "Thanks, Uncle Richard," Ethan said, his voice still slow but clear. Richard smiled, a rare genuine smile. After Ethan rested, Richard and I sat in the living room. "I'm following the financial counseling course," he said, voice low. "It's tougher than I thought, but thanks for giving me a chance." I nodded. "Keep things straight with the contract, Richard. That's the only way we move forward." He agreed, and for the first time I felt we could maintain a professional relationship without tension. 6 months after Ethan returned from Seattle Children's Hospital, our lives found a new rhythm. Ethan's recovery was remarkable. He returned to school with a tailored program suited to his physical and cognitive therapy needs. Though he tired quickly and sometimes forgot words mid-sentence, his curiosity and optimism remained intact. One morning, as I drove him to school, he pointed at the sky and asked, "Dad, if I become an astronaut, will you go to the moon with me?" I laughed, ruffling his hair. "I'll be the first to sign up, son." His teachers praised Ethan's perseverance, and he started drawing spaceship pictures, gifting me one labeled, "Dad and Ethan, Astronaut No. 1. Moments like these reminded me that, though the journey was long, Ethan was still my guiding light. My startup, named Nexus Security, took its first steps. With experience from Apex Innovations and funding from Summit Ventures, I built a data security platform for small businesses. I hired James Lee, a former Apex colleague, as CTO, and he brought the energy and dedication I needed. Lisa Carter, my best friend, often visited my makeshift office in my condo, bringing coffee and encouragement. Leaving Apex was a gamble, but I knew it was right to show Ethan a dad who dared to dream big. One evening, as Ethan and I sat on our condo's balcony, watching a fiery sunset over Seattle's sky, he suddenly asked, "Dad, are you happy about what happened? Not my accident, but the stuff with Uncle Richard and you getting braver?" The question stunned me. Ethan, with insight beyond his years, had noticed my change. I pulled him close, thinking for a moment. "I'm not happy you got hurt, Ethan. I wish I could erase that pain, but I'm glad we learned to be stronger together." He nodded, resting his head on my shoulder. "Like astronauts, right? Gotta face tough stuff to reach the stars." I learned to set boundaries, not out of selfishness, but to protect what's precious. I learned strength isn't in shouting or overpowering others, but in patience, preparation, and self-belief. Most importantly, I learned that crises, though painful, can lead to healing and growth. Whatever challenges lie ahead, we'll face them together, stronger than ever. I turned to Ethan, smiling. "You know what, son? We'll fly farther than those stars." The story of David Tran, a Seattle software engineer facing pressure from his boss Richard Hayes and his son Ethan's accident, mirrors real challenges in today's United States, especially in competitive workplaces and financial stress. David, a 45-year-old single dad, quietly owned the condo building through Summit Ventures but kept it secret to avoid exploitation, showing the caution and strategy needed in a society where power and trust are easily abused. Richard's demand to raise rent to $7,000 while Ethan was in the ICU reflects toxic workplace culture, where some managers use authority to pressure employees, a common issue in U.S. tech industries. David's shift from avoiding conflict to setting clear boundaries is a key lesson in self-assertion. His journey from leaving Apex Innovations to launching Nexus Security embodies entrepreneurial spirit and resilience, core values of the American dream. Support from Lisa, Henry, and James underscores the importance of community, vital in urban American life, where friends and colleagues often become a second family. Advice: learn from David how to set boundaries in work and life, especially when facing pressure from superiors like Richard. Don't shy away from defending your rights, but do so with preparation and calm, as David used legal contracts and Summit Ventures to assert his position. Build a support network like Lisa and Henry, and invest in long-term plans like David's startup to ensure financial security and personal freedom in a competitive society like the United States. Subscribe to the channel to follow David and Ethan's journey of overcoming challenges, and share your own story of resilience in the comments. Thank you for joining us, and see you in the next video with more inspiring stories.